Some ropes were never meant to carry justice. They were meant for cruelty, for drawing out pain until even hope turned brittle in the sun. On a blistering July afternoon in 1876, under a sky so white it hurt to look at, two young women hung from rough-hewn beams in the open flats outside Prescott Valley. Their wrists were bound tight above their heads, their toes dangling inches from the cracked earth. The desert wind pushed their bodies in slow, pitiful arcs. Whoever left them there hadn't wanted a quick death. They wanted a warning that baked into skin and bone. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story gets much more intense, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hannah couldn't have been more than 24. Her brown hair clung to her damp cheeks, lips split from thirst, eyes half closed against the glare. Beside her, Claire, barely 21, struggled for each ragged breath, strands of pale hair sticking to her face. Dust swirled at their feet, but the ground stayed just out of reach, a taunt as sharp as the ropes digging into their arms. Every heartbeat hurt, not just from the heat, but from the knowledge that someone had decided they were nothing more than examples. At the base of the posts, a charred plank stood crooked in the dirt. Carved letters burned dark into the wood. This land belongs to Randall. Strangers will perish. The sun seemed to brand those words into anyone foolish enough to come near. The West was supposed to hold promise, gold, open sky, a chance to start again. But by that summer, it had become a weapon in the hands of men like Randall Carver. Judge on paper, tyrant in practice, he treated soil as a prize and lives as tools to bend or break. The women had names, families, stories. To Randall, they were only leverage, another message to keep the valley scared. No jury, no trial, just slow suffering beneath an unblinking sun, while the town kept its head down. Even the air felt heavy with the weight of people who had stopped believing they could make a stand. Hoofbeats sounded faintly beyond the ridge, a steady rhythm growing closer. A lone rider appeared against the horizon, horse dark against the shimmer of heat. Sam Grady had seen enough endings in his 52 years to recognize when the end was near. Yet something in the sight before him, the ropes, the scorched sign, the women swaying in silence, cut deeper than war ever had. He pulled his gelding to a halt, eyes narrowing. Sam swung down, boots crunching dry earth. He moved fast, sliding his hunting knife from its sheath. The first rope gave way with a hiss of frayed hemp, and Hannah collapsed into his arms, limp and fevered but breathing. He carried her into the shade of an old cabin nearby and laid her carefully on the cool boards. Then he returned for Claire. She felt almost weightless, like the desert had already claimed part of her spirit. One step at a time, he bore her inside. The cabin smelled of dust and long neglect. Sam cleared a space on the floor, unrolled his blanket, and set the women down. From his canteen, he dribbled water against cracked lips. At first, nothing happened. Then Hannah swallowed, lashes flickering as if waking from a nightmare. Claire soon followed, weak fingers clutching his sleeve as if to anchor herself back to life. For a while, Sam just sat near the small fire he'd sparked, watching flames throw soft light across their faces. He thought about his brother, about the parcel of land that was supposed to be his peace after years of fighting. Instead, it had delivered him to a battlefield carved out by cruelty. The women stirred, trying to speak. Hannah's voice rasped like paper tearing. She told how Randall seized her family's ranch, leaving her father hollow with shame. Claire's tale was harsher, men dragging her from her doorway, branding her with threats, daring her to fight back. And she had, which was why she'd ended up strung to a beam in the sun. Sam listened without interrupting, one hand resting on the worn stock of his rifle. He hadn't come looking for trouble, but the frontier rarely let a man settle in peace. Outside, the wind sighed through mesquite, carrying the faint echo of voices somewhere in the distance. Randall's name hung there like a gathering storm. When power crushes the innocent, the question isn't if someone will face it. The question is who. Dawn slid over the horizon in slow streaks of orange and gold, washing the valley in fragile light. Sam woke before the sun fully cleared the hills. His side ached from sleeping against the porch rail, but the sight of Hannah and Claire stirring inside steadied him. They were pale, yes, but no longer shadows of themselves. Hannah even managed a faint smile as she sipped from the tin cup he'd left by her bedroll. "You should rest," Sam told her. "I've been resting long enough," she answered, voice scratchy but firmer than the night before. Claire nodded, her face still drawn, but carrying a quiet resolve. There was fight in both of them, buried under the bruises. Sam pushed to his feet, dusting off his coat. "I've got to see the sheriff," he said. "Someone has to put a line between Carver and this valley." Claire's brow furrowed. "Will he even listen?" "He'll listen to me," Sam replied, though he wasn't sure how much truth sat behind the words. He saddled his horse, pausing when Hannah caught his arm. "Please," she said, searching his face, "don't get yourself killed." "I've lived through worse," he tried to joke, but her worried look clung to him as he rode away. The town lay quiet in the cool of morning. Wooden storefronts threw long shadows across the dirt street. Sam dismounted outside the sheriff's office and stepped inside. Sheriff Cole looked up from behind a battered desk, a half-written report lying forgotten as soon as he saw Sam. "Well, I'll be," Cole said, standing to shake his hand. "Wasn't expecting you back so soon. Wouldn't be here if I didn't need to be." Sam set his hat on the table. "I found 2 young women strung up near my cabin. Randall Carver's work." Cole's expression darkened. "They alive?" "Barely, but they'll hold on." Sam leaned closer. "We can't let Carver keep branding folks like cattle. He's gone too far." The sheriff sighed and lowered himself into his chair. "You think I don't know? Every law in this valley bends when that man's shadow falls across it. He's got men on his payroll and money in every pocket." Cole rubbed his temple, weary. "You want justice? We'll need more than badges." Sam rested his palms on the desk. "We've got proof now. 2 women who can tell exactly what he did." "That's something," Cole admitted. "But witnesses alone won't stand if folks won't back them. People have been scared so long, they've forgotten how to stand tall." Sam thought of Caleb's words the night before, of the way the man had looked half-buried under shame. Maybe they just need someone to remind them. Cole's eyes sharpened. "You planning to be that someone?" Sam let the question hang. He wasn't sure if he wanted the role, but it was already sitting heavy on his shoulders. "I won't let those girls pay for Carver's cruelty again." The sheriff leaned back, studying him. "All right, I'll talk to the people I trust. But we gotta be careful. Carver's men won't blink at spilling blood." Sam nodded and stepped out into the street. The sun had climbed higher, chasing the cool shadows away. He walked past the general store, the saloon, faces peering through windows as he passed. Fear sat in their eyes, but also something else, curiosity, maybe hope. Back at the cabin, Hannah and Claire waited on the porch. Claire shaded her eyes as he approached. "Well, Cole's thinking on it," Sam said, tying his horse. "But we won't have long. Randall won't leave this alone." Hannah rose carefully, still stiff from the ordeal. "Then we'd better be ready." Sam studied the 2 of them, wounded, worn, yet standing. Maybe that was the answer. Courage didn't arrive polished and whole. It showed up bruised and tired, choosing to stand anyway. He felt a pull in his chest, a promise forming he hadn't meant to make. Whatever storm was coming, he wouldn't face it alone. Night crept over the valley slow and quiet, a cool breath after the sun's fury. Sam sat on the porch of the cabin with his rifle laid across his knees. Inside, faint lamplight spilled over Hannah and Claire as they rested on the bedroll. He could hear the shallow pull of their breaths, the soft rustle when one of them shifted in uneasy sleep. The silence wasn't peace. It was the kind that presses on a man's chest, reminding him how fragile everything can be. He rubbed a hand over his tired face and scanned the darkness. He hadn't meant to get involved. He'd ridden west to leave fighting behind, to find a little ground where memories of gun smoke and graves wouldn't follow him. Yet here he was, guarding 2 strangers from a man who ruled by fear. Some things, he supposed, wouldn't let a man keep his distance. A shape moved at the edge of the moonlight. Sam's hand slid to the rifle. A single rider approached, leading his horse slow, palms lifted in truce. The man's hat shadowed a lined face, but the voice that carried across the yard was familiar. "Sam, it's me. Caleb." Sam lowered the barrel an inch, but didn't relax. Caleb Harper had once fought alongside Sam's brother during the war. Time had carved worry into him. His shoulders sagged like he'd been carrying a heavy secret too long. "You should have kept riding," Caleb said quietly when he reached the porch. "You cut them loose. Randall won't forgive that. He'll come for you before dawn." Sam studied him, reading the strain around Caleb's eyes. "You riding with Randall now?" Caleb looked away. "I don't ride for him. I just keep my head down. Man like that don't leave much room for choices." He glanced toward the door, where Hannah's faint shadow moved against the lamplight. "They'll kill those girls if they get the chance. And you too." The older man sighed, fingers tracing the scar on the rifle's stock. "I didn't haul them out of the sun just to hand them back over." Caleb nodded, sadness in the gesture. "Then be ready. Randall's gathering his hands. He figures scaring the whole town at once will settle things." He hesitated, voice dropping. "I never thank your brother for saving my hide at Shiloh. Guess I'm trying now, through you." Sam felt a sting behind his eyes, memories of mud and cannon smoke crowding close. "He'd have wanted you to stand tall, Caleb, not to bury yourself in fear." Caleb's jaw worked, but he didn't answer. He swung up into the saddle, the leather creaking in the quiet. "I'll do what I can," he murmured, then rode off, fading into the silver wash of moonlight. Sam watched until the night swallowed him. He stayed there long after, weighing the cost of what lay ahead. Inside, a small cry broke the stillness. Claire stirred, murmuring something he couldn't catch. Sam stepped in, kneeling by her side. Her eyes fluttered open. "Are we safe?" she whispered. "For now," he said softly. "But trouble's coming." Hannah stirred next, voice hoarse but steady. "You don't have to stay. We don't want you hurt on our account." Sam shook his head. "I made my choice when I cut those ropes. I won't walk off and leave you." He poured a little water into a tin cup, holding it for them to sip. Their fingers trembled against his as they drank, but there was strength in their gaze now, a spark fighting its way back. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of mesquite smoke from the valley. Somewhere out there, Randall Carver was tightening his grip, counting on everyone staying quiet. Sam knew the silence had lasted too long. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't be decided by fear. By late afternoon, the sky blazed white, the air heavy with a stillness that warned of trouble. Sam tightened the cinch on his horse and scanned the land around the cabin. The valley looked calm, but his gut told him it was only the quiet before a hard storm. Inside, Hannah sat near the small window, combing her fingers carefully through Claire's tangled hair, trying to work out the dust and burrs. Their laughter was faint but real, a fragile sound that fought to stay alive after so much darkness. Sam watched them a moment before stepping inside. "You two ought to keep low," he said gently. Hannah glanced up, eyes steady despite the bruise fading along her cheek. "We're not made of glass, Sam." "I know," he answered, leaning his rifle by the door. "But Carver won't forgive what happened yesterday. He'll come angry, and he won't care who gets in the way." Claire shifted, pulling a blanket tighter around her shoulders. "How many men do you think he has?" "Enough," Sam admitted. "But numbers don't mean much if folks stop running." Hannah set the comb aside, her voice calm. "Do you really believe anyone in town will stand with us? They've been afraid for years." Sam lowered himself onto the bench across from them. He felt the weight of her question. "Fear's a hard thing to shake," he said quietly. "But I've seen people do it when the right moment comes." His gaze moved between them. "The day I cut those ropes, I chose to fight. Now I need to know if you're willing to fight too, even if all that means is staying alive." Claire looked at her friend, then back at Sam. "We're not going back to that post," she whispered. "If that means standing, we'll stand." He nodded once, a quiet agreement sealing between them. The late sun bled through the window, painting the room amber. For the first time since dawn, Sam felt a flicker of hope. Not long after, a faint tremor passed through the floorboards, the faraway rhythm of hooves. Sam stood and reached for his rifle. Through the haze, a dark line of riders crested the ridge, their silhouettes stretching long against the burning sky. At their center rode Randall Carver, his black coat snapping in the wind like a banner. Even from a distance, the man's presence pressed down on the land. Hannah's breath caught. It's him. Sam's voice was steady, though a current of tension ran beneath it. Inside, both of you. He shut the door after them, sliding the bolt. Keep your heads down, he added, softer now. Whatever happens, don't give him the satisfaction of seeing you scared. He stepped back onto the porch, meeting Sheriff Cole, who had just arrived with 3 townsfolk, a shopkeeper, a ranch hand, and an older woman gripping a scattergun. They traded brief nods, the kind that passed for courage when words felt too heavy. Carver's riders slowed as they neared the clearing. Dust rose behind them like a storm cloud. Randall dismounted first, boots crunching on brittle earth. His eyes swept the scene with a predator's calm before resting on Sam. You've made yourself a hero, Grady, he called out, voice smooth but sharp underneath. Hand over my property, and we'll end this without spilling blood. Sam's hands tightened on the rifle. They're not property. They're people. A ripple of anger flickered across Randall's face. You think you can change how this valley runs? I built this place. I decide who lives here. Not anymore, Cole said, stepping forward. His voice was firm, though his jaw was tight. You've had your way too long. Randall laughed, a cold sound that set the riders shifting in their saddles. You're outnumbered, Sheriff. You can't protect them. Sam raised the rifle, calm in the face of the man's sneer. Maybe not, but I'm done watching good folks hang while everyone looks the other way. Behind him, through the window's crack, Hannah's eyes met his. There was fear there, yes, but something stronger, trust. It steadied him. Around the yard, neighbors adjusted their grips on rifles and shotguns, trading nervous glances that slowly turned into quiet resolve. They were farmers, storekeepers, mothers and sons, but together they stood taller than fear. The standoff stretched, heat shimmering off gun barrels. Sam felt sweat slide down his spine. He knew once the first shot came, there'd be no turning back. Yet somewhere in that tense silence, a truth settled in his bones. If no one dared to push back, Randall Carver's shadow would own this valley forever. The sun stood high when the shooting began. It started with one sharp crack from somewhere in Randall's line. Then the whole clearing roared to life. Dust leapt from the ground as bullets tore through dry grass. Sam braced the rifle against his shoulder and fired back, calm and steady. Years of battles had taught him to breathe slow and keep his hands firm, no matter how fast his heart raced. Sheriff Cole shouted orders, waving people to spread out. The shopkeeper crouched behind a barrel and fired, his hands shaking so bad he almost dropped the gun. The ranch hand stayed low, working the lever on his old carbine. Even the older woman lifted her scattergun and sent a blast across the field, the recoil almost knocking her down but not stopping her. Randall's men charged. Their coats flapped as they spurred their horses forward. Sam saw faces hard with anger, eyes hungry for control. He sighted the lead rider and squeezed the trigger. The man tumbled from the saddle, horse screaming as it veered away. More riders poured through the dust, but the people beside Sam didn't break. For the first time, the valley fought back. Inside the cabin, Hannah and Claire huddled by the back wall. Hannah held Claire's hand tight, whispering steady words even as her own fear showed in her eyes. He won't let them take us, she said, voice low. Not while he's breathing. Claire nodded, pressing her face against her friend's shoulder. Outside, the fight grew wild. Gun smoke rolled thick, filling the air with the sharp smell of powder. Sam moved through it with calm purpose, shifting between porch and yard, using every scrap of cover. A shot grazed his sleeve, another split the post beside his head. He didn't flinch, only worked the lever and fired again. Then a heavy punch struck his side. Pain ripped through him, hot and blinding. He dropped to one knee, the rifle slipping from his hands. For a heartbeat, everything blurred, sky, dust, shouts blending together. He tasted iron and felt the grit of earth against his palms. Hannah burst from the cabin before anyone could stop her. She ran across the yard, skirts brushing dry weeds. Bullets hissed past, but she didn't slow. She knelt beside Sam, sliding an arm around his shoulders. Stay with me, she said fiercely, her face pale but eyes clear. Sam forced a rough breath, gripping the rifle again. "Get back inside." "No," she said. "Not leaving you." Her words cut through the haze, steadying him. He pushed himself upright, leaning on her for a moment before straightening alone. Sheriff Cole glanced over, relief flashing quick before he turned back to the fight. "Hold the line," he barked. The townsfolk answered, their fire stronger now, anger replacing fear. Randall's men, used to easy victories, faltered under the resistance. Some turned their horses, retreating toward the ridge. Others tried one last rush and fell to the ground as bullets found them. Randall himself stayed on foot, eyes burning like coals. He aimed at Sam, but Sam fired first, grazing the man's shoulder. Randall staggered back, shock flashing across his face. He wasn't untouchable after all. The fight slowed as the riders broke apart, some fleeing, others dropping their weapons. Smoke hung in the air, drifting across the yard like a thin fog. Sam lowered the rifle, his wounded side throbbing. Cole moved closer, scanning the horizon for any last threat. Only Randall remained, standing stiff among the fallen, his glare locked on Sam. The valley went quiet, only the wind sighing through mesquite branches. Sam met Randall's stare, knowing the battle wasn't over yet. But the people had stood, and that mattered more than anything. Fear had met its match in courage. Smoke drifted across the yard, soft and gray against the harsh blue sky. The battle's noise had faded, leaving a heavy stillness over the valley. Sam leaned against the porch rail, pressing a hand to the wound at his side. Warm blood seeped through his shirt, but his eyes stayed fixed on Randall Carver, who stood alone now among his fallen riders. The man's dark coat was torn at the shoulder where Sam's bullet had struck. For the first time, Randall looked unsure. "You're finished," Sam called, voice rough but steady. Randall's gaze swept the porch, the cabin, the cluster of neighbors standing with their guns lowered but ready. His mouth tightened. "You think this changes anything?" Fear runs deeper than a single day. Sheriff Cole stepped forward, holstering his revolver. "Maybe, but fear won't feed these people anymore." He nodded toward the townsfolk, the shopkeeper gripping his empty rifle, the ranch hand with dust on his face, the older woman holding her scattergun like it was part of her body. "They've already chosen." Randall's jaw clenched. For a moment, Sam thought he might draw his weapon, but instead the man spat into the dirt. "This isn't over," he said, backing toward his horse. "I built my power brick by brick. You can't tear it down with one good deed." He mounted, favoring his injured arm, and rode off, gathering the few men who could still follow. Sam let out a long breath and lowered his rifle. His knees felt weak, but he wouldn't let himself collapse in front of the people who had stood beside him. Cole came closer, his face softening. "You're bleeding bad. Let's get you inside." Hannah and Claire rushed from the cabin. Hannah's hands hovered at Sam's sleeve, unsure where to touch. "Sit," she urged, guiding him toward the doorway. Claire fetched a folded blanket, spreading it on the floor near the fire. Together, they eased him down. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and dust. Hannah knelt with a strip of clean cloth, dabbing gently at the wound. Her fingers were careful but firm, and Sam could see how hard she fought to keep them steady. Claire boiled water on the small stove, glancing over with worried eyes. "You shouldn't have come out there," Sam murmured to Hannah. Her look was sharp but kind. "And leave you to die? Not likely." He tried to smile, but it came out as a wince. "You've got more grit than most men I've met." She pressed the cloth harder against his side. "I learned grit the hard way," she said softly. Claire knelt beside them, passing Hannah a clean rag. "We'll stop the bleeding," she said with quiet determination. "You saved us. We're not letting you go." Sam felt something stir inside him, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. These two women, strangers only yesterday, had already become part of the fight that kept him alive. Outside, neighbors gathered, speaking in low voices. Some checked on the fallen horses. Others helped carry wounded riders to a shady patch far from the cabin. A few even laid gentle hands on Sam's shoulder before heading home, promising to watch the ridge for trouble. Their faces, lined and tired, carried something new, pride. As dusk settled, Cole returned from scouting the edge of the valley. "They're gone for now," he said. Ran back the way they came. He studied Sam, who sat propped against the wall with Hannah still tending him. "But they'll lick their wounds and try again. We've only bought time." Sam nodded slowly. Pain made his head swim, but he kept his focus on the sheriff. "Then we'll use it. Folks proved today they're stronger than he thought." Cole allowed a small smile. Maybe stronger than they thought. The room filled with a calm quiet, the kind that follows a storm but carries its memory. Hannah spread a quilt over Sam and set a cup of warm broth by his hand. Claire sat cross-legged near the fire, keeping watch as flames flickered against the walls. Sam looked from one woman to the other, then at Cole, and finally at the door where the first stars blinked against the dark. For years he had wandered, searching for peace in empty places. Now, hurt and exhausted, he realized he had found something better, people worth standing for. Night spread across the valley, cool and wide after the burning day. The small cabin glowed from a single lantern, its light falling over rough boards and tired faces. Sam lay against a pile of blankets, one arm resting across his bandaged side. Hannah sat near him, coaxing the fire to life when it tried to die. Claire sat close too, her knees pulled up, a look of quiet watchfulness in her eyes. Outside, the last townsfolk drifted away, heading back to their homes. Sheriff Cole stayed a little longer, standing on the porch with his hat in his hands. He looked older in the lantern glow, worn by years of trying to keep order where law often meant nothing. At last he stepped inside, lowering himself to a stool. "Riders won't return tonight," Cole said. "But Carver won't swallow this loss easy. He'll find another way." Sam nodded, keeping his voice even though fatigue pulled at him. "Let him try. Folks saw today that he bleeds like anyone else." Cole studied him. "I remember you years back, quiet, steady. Thought you came here to put all that fighting behind you." "I did," Sam said, eyes on the flames. "But sometimes peace won't stay put unless you stand up for it." For a while nobody spoke. The crackle of fire filled the room, mixing with the faint rustle of the night breeze slipping through the cracks. Hannah set a bowl of warm broth near Sam, urging him to drink. He obeyed slowly, the heat calming the tremor in his hands. "You saved us," Claire said at last. Her voice was soft but certain. "I don't know how to thank you." Sam met her gaze. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "All I wanted was to keep you from being left to die." Hannah looked at him for a long moment, her expression a mixture of gratitude and something quieter, harder to name. She touched his arm gently, almost shyly. "Whatever comes next, you won't be facing it alone." The words settled around Sam like a promise. He thought of the long years after the war when every road felt empty, every campfire silent. He had convinced himself that loneliness was safer than losing someone again. But sitting there, surrounded by people who had chosen to stay, he felt a warmth that made the risk worth it. Cole stood, stretching stiffly. "I'll keep watch tonight. You three get some rest." He moved to the doorway, rifle across his shoulder, and took up a place against the frame, eyes on the dark horizon. Hannah spread a second blanket over Sam, smoothing the edges. "Try to sleep," she said. Sam looked at her face in the lantern light. Tired, marked by what she'd endured, but steady as bedrock. He nodded, letting his eyes close for a moment. The scent of wood smoke and the soft sound of breathing wrapped around him. For the first time in years, sleep didn't feel like surrender. It felt like trust. Later, near midnight, Sam stirred awake. The cabin was quiet except for the whisper of wind. He saw Hannah dozing lightly beside the fire, her head resting against the wall. Claire lay curled near the hearth, her hand still holding a piece of cloth she'd used to tend his wound. Cole's shadow showed at the door, watchful and solid. Sam looked at each of them, and something eased in his chest. This valley might be scarred, its people bruised, but strength lived here too, in kindness, in grit, in the simple decision to keep one another safe. Maybe tomorrow would bring more danger. Maybe Carver wasn't finished. But tonight, they had carved a place where fear didn't rule. He shifted carefully, wincing at the pull in his side, then settled again. The lantern's light caught the edge of Hannah's hair, turning it gold. Sam let his eyes close, holding on to that image, a quiet anchor in a world that had offered too little comfort. Morning came soft over Prescott Valley, a pale wash of gold rolling across the hills. Thin mist clung to the low grass, curling around fence posts and the scattered shapes of wagons. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned down to embers. Sam stirred awake to the sound of quiet voices and the smell of coffee drifting through the room. Hannah stood by the window, hair loose around her shoulders as she watched the valley stretch beneath the first light. Claire crouched near the hearth, feeding the coals with small twigs. Sheriff Cole leaned in the doorway, his face lined but calm, a rifle resting loosely in his hands. Sam eased himself upright, biting back a groan from the wound. Hannah turned, her eyes bright in the soft dawn. "How's the pain?" she asked. "Less than last night," he said, managing a faint smile. "Guess you patched me up better than I thought." Claire handed him a tin cup of coffee, careful not to spill a drop. "Drink while it's hot," she said. "You'll need your strength." Outside, the valley looked different. The same land, the same mountains, but something in the air felt lighter. A handful of neighbors arrived from town, bringing bread, bandages, even a small crate of eggs. They stood together in the yard, trading shy smiles, voices low with the weight of what they'd done the day before. Fear had cracked, letting something sturdier come through. Cole stepped aside to let them enter. "Looks like you started something," he murmured to Sam. "I didn't start it," Sam replied. They just remembered what they already had. The people gathered in the cabin, placing their gifts on the table. A boy of maybe 12 tugged at Sam's sleeve. "Mama says you're the reason Carver ran," he said. Sam rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I'm not the reason," Sam said gently. "Everyone who stood yesterday is." Hannah met his eyes, her smile small but warm. "You gave them a reason to believe," she said. Sam looked around at the faces in the room. Neighbors, friends, 2 women who'd come through hell and chosen to live. He thought about the years he'd spent roaming, keeping his heart locked tight so nothing could break it again. The lesson sat clear in his chest now. Safety wasn't found in hiding. It was built in the courage to stand with others. Outside, the sun cleared the hills, casting long, golden beams across the valley. Carver might return, or another man like him, but the ground had shifted. The people had tasted their own strength, and no tyrant could take that from them easily. Sam pushed to his feet, slow but steady. He stepped onto the porch, letting the morning air fill his lungs. Hannah joined him, her hand brushing his as she stood beside him. Claire followed, eyes bright despite everything she had endured. Cole came last, his hat pulled low against the growing light. For a long moment they stood together, looking over the land that had cost so much and finally offer promise. Behind them, neighbors began to talk quietly about fences to mend, fields to plant, a school to reopen. Life, stubborn and steady, was ready to move forward. Sam turned to Hannah, then to Claire and Cole. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it together." Hannah's fingers slipped into his, sure and steady. Claire smiled, soft but full of resolve. Cole tipped his hat, eyes glinting with approval. The valley wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was theirs, earned by grit, by kindness, by the choice to help instead of look away. That was the real victory. Not a single fight won, but the way people discovered they were stronger than the shadows trying to break them. And maybe that was the true Sam had been searching for all along. The West wasn't just open land or hard men and gun smoke. It was a place where hearts could grow again if someone dared to clear a space for hope. Even in the harshest country, one act of courage could light a fire no tyrant could put out. Sam drew a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun spread across his shoulders. For the first time in years, the horizon looked wide with possibility.